I am going to seek to present before you a cause for hope. And the late assassinated member of San Francisco Board of Supervisors, Harvey Milk, was famous for saying, "You've got to give them hope. You've got to give them hope." And a young man, a young gay man in Texas, Lance Black, who wrote the script for the movie Milk, heard Harvey Milk say, "You've got to give them hope," back when Lance was a little boy, afraid of being a gay child in Texas. And that message gave him hope. And that's what we're about, sisters and brothers, is being messengers of hope, but not only to everyone else, but to each other as well, and to ourselves, to find the well of hope that is in us, and to be able to recommend it to others. I'm going to start, I hope, screen sharing. And I know this is going to go so smoothly. Good. And I'm trusting you all can see that. And we're going to play from the start. Now, again, as with those different words there, these are different as well, a little bit. Now, these three things abide: faith, hope, and overflowing love. Usually, this is translated overflowing love in different ways, but I'm trying to translate it positively and talk about that which is welling up from us. It's not love that is unconditional. That's a negative way to put it. It's love that moves forward because it is God's love. So let me move to the next. Now, are you all seeing this whole screen, or is it just the little thumbnails to the left?
We got the whole screen, but we are waiting for the slideshow itself. That makes sense.
I think there's a way for you to widen it, though.
You need to make it full screen.
Just go to slideshow at top.
Type and stop.
There you go.
There we go. So to what shall I compare the beloved community? This love, this overflowing love, is what creates the beloved community. And it is the beloved community that is the source of hope for all of us, with all our commitments and all of our fears. And I'm going to invite you to listen to the words of our current beloved presiding bishop, Michael Curry, in a sermon, a little excerpt from a sermon. Michael can preach a powerful long sermon that he gave recently to a virtual meeting of the House of Bishops. And I think Perry, one of our hosts, is going to actually play that clip from the video for you now. So listen closely to the words about the beloved community.
I never noticed it in this text, and this is I'm going to be very brief today. I'm about to stop. Well, close to it. In Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount says, he says, "You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, so that you may become children of your Father who is in heaven." It never dawned on me that there it is. There is what we sometimes call that beloved community, that it is created when love, the love that Jesus taught us, the love that he showed us when he gave up his life, not for anything that he could get, that way of unselfish, sacrificial love, that is the way to the beloved community of God. It is the way to redeem our nations. It is the way to overcome the divisions among us. Unselfish, sacrificial love that seeks the good. That love is the way. It is the only way. And it is the way to the heart of God and to each other. It's the way to the beloved community. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. I've told you before on other occasions how my parents became Episcopalian. Both of them grew up Baptist in the old classic Black Baptist tradition. Anyway, my mother went to college and she was a mathematician, so she was into rationality. So she read C.S. Lewis and his approach to faith spoke to her, and she eventually got confirmed. And my father was dating her years later, and they went to an Episcopal church. This was in the late 1940s. Went to an Episcopal church, and he was sitting there, and they were the only Black folk, I suspect, in the congregation. And when it came time for communion, he noticed that there was a common cup. He had never been in a predominantly white church before, and he had never been in a church where people were about to drink out of the same cup. And when he saw that my mother drank out of a cup, the chalice, and white folk drank out of the chalice, he would say that any church where Black folk and white folk drink from the same cup knows something about the gospel that I want to be a part of. I've told y'all that story before.
Amen.
In that moment, he didn't say it. These weren't his words. I suspect he saw something of that beloved community, a foretaste of the kingdom. And he spent the rest of his life trying to make that happen here on earth.
I heard an amen out there. Wasn't that beautiful? And so on point. So we're going to just pause for a moment, and my friends in the host committee are going to throw you all, they're going to fling you into breakout rooms with this question. What do you feel and what do you think? What do you feel and what do you think when you hear the phrase, the beloved community? And just talk to each other about that and share with each other. We're hearing it a lot. If you heard Senator Kamala Harris give her acceptance speech last night, you heard her refer to the beloved community. And she was referring to it because John Lewis was referring to the beloved community not long before his death. He, I must tell you, is the person who introduced me to the term beloved community. And I only knew it as what he said, beloved community. I didn't know much of what it meant, but I knew what it made me feel. And I had an inkling of what it made me think. And it started me on a path to try to learn more about what is the beloved community. So let's if you all are ready to host folks, to throw people, fling us into the breakout rooms. And you'll be back in just a few minutes, and then I'll carry on.
Yes, and we've asked, this is Robin Hollis, and we've asked our scribe, and I will go to full screen. And you should be seeing it continue to build, Bishop Marc.
Great.
And then
these are beautiful.
And we'll have all these, yeah, we'll collate all of the results and things, and you'll get a report with all this information.
Belonging, I saw warmth, a starting point, community. Enduring, that's great. No more tears. The Holy Episcopal Church is my beloved community, cherished.
Oh, heart pounding.
Way to the heart of God. That's very beautiful, isn't it? Child at home, intimacy. I just love the wisdom of the gathered people of God, God's people to others. This is just really beautiful. Okay, so thank you all. We're going to have a chance to look at more of these, part of something greater than myself. That's so apt. So let's move back to this story that's unfolding among us. And so you heard Bishop Curry say it. The phrase beloved community came from the New Testament. And right at the beginning of the 20th century, a man who was born in Grass Valley, California, up in the Diocese of Northern California, named Josiah Royce, who was teaching at Harvard, wrote a book called The Problem of Christianity. And in it, he coined the term beloved community. And it was his way, he was a philosopher, and it was his way of taking New Testament terms like the kingdom of heaven and moving them into a place where the whole world could learn from them and embrace them. And that's what the beloved community is, the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God. This is where it comes from. So we can say this is the container for hope. The beloved community is a container for hope. It is what Jesus preached throughout the Galilee, throughout his ministry. He was preaching himself, proclaiming the nearness of the kingdom of heaven, the beloved community, and he was telling his disciples to do the same thing. Once, when Jesus was asked when and where the beloved community was coming, he replied, "The beloved community is not coming as things that can be observed. Now will they say, here it is, or there it is, for indeed the beloved community is within you and among you." That's how close it is, sisters and brothers. It is not far from us. It is not in the distant future. It is here among us and within us, a cause for hope, palpable hope. And so this is a central idea for me. Climate and environmental action starts in the heart. This is good news, and this is a matter for hope, because there's much that you all are doing. You're acting in the world of advocacy, protest, change, climate action of various kinds, planting gardens, all the things that you're doing, fantastic, and keep doing them. But if you want to know how to start changing the planet in terms of climate and environment, we have no further to look than within ourselves, where the beloved community is, and within our own communities. It's both within us and among us. Our response to the climate crisis and to environmental injustice begins with understanding and tending our own hearts as if they were gardens, asking, what do I treasure? As Jesus said, where our treasure is, there our hearts will be also. So learning to nourish those things that are of the beloved community within us, and to leave aside, not try to uproot. Jesus had some words about that too, but to let those other things, the weeds, grow, but tend that which is of the beloved community. Then Jesus sent them out to proclaim the beloved community and to heal. Our mission together as followers of Jesus. This was his primary message. As my first New Testament professor, Reginald Fuller, used to say, if I, by the finger of God, cast out demons, then the beloved community, he said, the kingdom of heaven, has come among you. This was Jesus's primary message. So Jesus went along the lakeside and he called his first disciples. And I love both these paintings. The bottom right is by Tissot, late 19th century. But the top one is of women repairing nets. And that was the second group of disciples he called. The second group of brothers were mending nets. And I think we should pay attention to that. We always talk about him calling the first two brothers and saying, I will make you fishers of people. And then he walked a little further down the lakeside and he saw these brothers mending nets, these sisters in this case, mending nets, and he called them. I think there's a message there too. He's asking us to become fishers of people, and he's implying that we also become menders of nets. That is, repairing the beloved community. This is a big idea. We're not only evangelizing people, we're repairing that which has been torn and broken. So where is the entry to the beloved community? And here's an idea that I've been putting forward since the Paris Agreement in Paris and then in Marrakesh the next year. We enter the beloved community because, as we said, it's right here, but often we don't see it. When we're lured by God through beauty and wonder. This is an abstract expressionist contemporary painting of Moses being lured by God to step off the path, and he sees this strange sight, which here is a beautiful sight of a bush which is burning and yet not consumed by the fire. And I love the way this artist has captured the idea that this wasn't just a strange sight, it was also a beautiful sight. And I just want to ask you, as I've asked a small group of people in Grace Cathedral that included Bishop Catherine, when did you have an experience of wonder? When did you have an experience of wonder that was mediated, that was brought to you, not by another human being? We've had many examples in our lives, I hope, of being in the presence of a person, a human being, and experiencing wonder, kind of that beginning of falling in love. But you've also, I almost am sure, have had an experience of wonder, lured by beauty and wonder into the beloved community by seeing something, as I put it, at the macro scale, could be a galaxy, seeing the Milky Way at night, or the comet that some of you were able to see earlier this summer, or something at the human scale, those turkeys that were in the virtual background of one of the deacons earlier today, or something at the microscopic scale. I remember a lay woman in Alabama, when I asked this question to their council, diocesan council, she said that when she was a young woman, a girl in Alabama public school, and she looked through a microscope for the first time, and she saw Volvox, a small microscopic creature, whirling across the screen. She was so overcome by wonder and beauty that she fainted. I love that. She wasn't hurt when she fainted, but that's the beginning, isn't it, of falling in love. And when Deacon Vivian was praying us through the 4 directions, she talked about all of us being relations. Mitakwe Oyesen, the Lakota phrase for all my relations, all my kin. I kind of think that this is where the experience of wonder comes from. It goes all the way back to the beginning of creation when, as cosmology would tell us, and it's not contradicted by our Genesis stories, that everything emanated, came from one point, we say from a divine origin. And what I think wonder is when we recognize one of our kin, a moment when somehow we recognize that you and I and the grizzly bear, I and the salmon, all came from the same source. And we feel it and we recognize our kin and we go, I love you. I think this is where beauty and wonder are taking us. And it's the entryway into the beloved community. So why can't we see it? What keeps us from seeing this beloved community that is within us and among us all the time? And beauty lures us into it. Wonder takes us through the gateway to it. This is ancient Egyptian painting, wall painting, that comes from about 1800 BC, before the Common Era. And it is indeed a depiction of Hebrew slaves making bricks in Egypt. This is a story we all know. It has become our story. We understand the idea of people enslaved for 400 years. This is a story that has been sadly repeated. And strangely, though, when the Hebrew people are freed by God's mighty outstretched arm and they are on their way, they're on the other side of the Red Sea and they're on their way, they start to long for the Egypt they have left. As it says, the cucumbers and the onions and all these other delicious things that I would long for too. But look at, this is what they left. But it was their normal. It was the life they knew. And it prevented them from seeing the beloved community in which they were. So what I'm saying is that we each, in our own time, each culture that is not of God, that is not of the beloved community, can deceive us, can be an illusion to which we give credence, to which we believe. And we say, this is reality. There's power in it. There's safety in it. There's security. Even though it's terrible, it's the world I know. And it prevents us from seeing the beloved community which is within us and among us. So the Emergence Network, which is a fantastic group that's helping lead people through poetry and music and art and the voice of indigenous people to better climate solutions and to a better relationship to the earth, says, what if the way to respond to the crisis is part of the crisis? What if the way that we respond is part of the crisis? So our perception. This is something that I said in Grace Cathedral at the beginning of the Global Climate Action Summit. Isn't that picture so beautiful? What we love, we will protect. So that experience of wonder that you called to mind, that awakened in your heart just a few minutes ago, if we awaken that feeling of wonder and remember when we had it, will we not give a great deal to protect that which has awakened love and wonder in our lives, that part of the beloved community we have recognized as our own relations that have come just as we have from the divine hand that has made us? As St. Paul preached on the Areopagus, as put in the book of Acts, are we not all? And I would invite you to think that all means all, not just every human being, but all. Are we not all offspring of the divine? Those California fuchsias in that picture, and that hummingbird who is visiting them for nectar, both offspring of the divine. What will I give? What will I do to protect that beauty? How far will my action take me to protect that member of the beloved, those members of the beloved community? So mending the net of the beloved community, what are the elements of it? And this, I think, in terms of hope, I think this is partly where we stumble, or where I stumble sometimes. And in conversation with people in the Diocese of California and across the Episcopal Church and in that UN faith space that I get to interact with every year or so, I find people saying, there's a lot of things I'm committed to. Black lives matter. Indigenous lives matter. I'm concerned about immigration rights. All these things that we justly give our efforts to. What about, I'm overwhelmed. How do I do all these things? Let me say, they are all within the container of the beloved community. So I'm going to name some of them. And these came in the evolution of the understanding of the beloved community from Josiah Royce up to now. So this was part of his own definition of what was the beloved community, that this unconditional love, which I say is overflowing love, is what makes the beloved community hang together. This is a Rembrandt drawing of Jesus washing the feet of his closest disciples, or a group of them, in what we call the Last Supper, when he says, I give you a new teaching, a new commandment, that you would agape, that you were overflowing love one another. Also, mending the net of the beloved community, another quality that Josiah Royce said was a hallmark of the beloved community was that it includes all people. Now, he was writing in 1913 and he said all people, and he meant human beings. Our own presiding bishop has said, I now understand the family of God to include all of life. And this I take to be the true understanding of the beloved community. We'll come to that, but at least all people. So our allegiance to that is part of the mending the net of the beloved community. All of life is interconnected. This is a quotation from Martin Luther King Jr. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. You recognize that this particular time he said this came from what I believe must be one of the great productions of written and spoken English language in the 20th century, the letter from a Birmingham jail. It was not the first time he said it. He said this back in the 1950s, but in this case, 1963. All of life is interconnected. This is a hallmark of the beloved community. In the next generation of the beloved community, A.J. Muste, who was a founder of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, of which Martin Luther King and Thich Nhat Hanh were both members, Muste said, nonviolence is a hallmark of the beloved community. This is the late, of course, you recognize John Lewis. This is John Lewis walking with a group of Episcopalians in Alabama back just the year before, the year that Sheila and I moved to California. We were celebrating the pilgrimage for for Jonathan Daniels. That's Jonathan on my left, on your left, holding a child there in Lowndes County. And now we renamed that pilgrimage as Jonathan Daniels and the Martyrs of Alabama. We needed to expand that circle a little beyond a white northerner to celebrate some more. So nonviolence, which John Lewis devoted his life to, A.J. Muste said, is a hallmark of the beloved community. The next generation of the beloved community was led by Howard Thurman, who was a mentor of Martin Luther King Jr. And it was he who called the mostly white Fellowship of Reconciliation to understand that racial reconciliation had to be embraced as part of the understanding of what the beloved community was about, or it was hollow. In other words, the fellowship was working hard to make international peace, and it was being led by white men. And Thurman said, unless you can turn your eyes and look back here at home in the United States and recognize that we have a great deal of work to do in racial reconciliation, this work of international peace will have no legs, will go nowhere. We have to understand that racial reconciliation is part of mending the net of the beloved community. Then, if you will, Thurman passed the lineage holding of the beloved community to Martin Luther King Jr. And he did what I call prophetic Christianity. He carried it out into the street. This is actually a climate march in Marrakesh during the climate summit the year after the Paris Agreement. And he brought activism, community organizing, protest, and advocacy, not the first time, but in a way that we could all see it and find our way into it as a hallmark of the beloved community. The church was not meant to be quiescent and stay within its walls. It was meant to join all of civil society in the streets, if you will, in Congress, in advocacy, in letter writing, in all the ways that are there. Interestingly, in 1967, Dr. King passed his understanding of the beloved community to a young Vietnamese monk, Thich Nhat Hanh. The last time they met in Geneva in 1967 at the Pacham and Terrace conference, King literally spoke the truth of the beloved community to Thich Nhat Hanh, who in 2014, just before his massive stroke, said, I made a deep vow to continue what Martin called the beloved community on the day that he was assassinated, that king was assassinated, and I have kept that vow to this day. One of the things that Thich Nhat Hanh was working on in 1966, when he was exiled by the North and South in Vietnam at the time, was gender equality in Buddhism. And he has gone home as a deeply debilitated person who cannot speak, who cannot walk, cannot write, but is still active to continue the work specifically of gender equality in terms of ordaining women in Buddhism in Southeast Asia and in Vietnam. So he brought, I believe, that understanding to the fore, specifically in what we understand as the beloved community mending the net. There are a whole lot of ordained women on this in this conference, in this call, and of course our beloved presiding Bishop Catherine Jefferson Shorey was the first primate in the entire Anglican Communion as an ordained woman. And so we have our own about 50-year history in the Episcopal Church of living with what that reality and that leadership looks like. What does gender equality call us to understand in the beloved community? To understand that is to begin to mend and repair the beloved community. That picture is of number 5 in the Sustainable Development Goals, which we'll touch on in a few minutes, which is on gender equality. And then finally, Thich Nhat Hanh said, all of life, all of the cosmos is in the beloved community. It was he who brought this broader idea that Royce started with, all people. Thich Nhat Hanh said, well, the earth is a bodhisattva, an enlightened being. The sun is a bodhisattva, an enlightened being. He said that the nun, Sister Chan Kang, was a great bodhisattva. He said that a non-Buddhist Christian, Martin Luther King, was a great bodhisattva. He blew up this idea of who was an enlightened being, or let's say a saint, a good Christian. And he said all of these beings, the earth, the sun, concrete human women, and non-Buddhist, all were in the beloved community. And that's where we are with our understanding of repairing the beloved community. All these deeply devastated ecosystems that we depend on, in which we are embedded, are as equally parts of the beloved community as we are. It's fundamental that we grasp that as part of understanding it. But may I say that as soon as we acknowledge that in our own hearts, to return to one of the earliest points of this, it begins to actually work the repair of the beloved community. It starts with my perception change. When I see this, it starts to be true. Jesus has given the beloved community to us to tend. I had a little line of lineage holders from Josiah Royce to A.J. Muste to Howard Thurman to Martin Luther King Jr. to Thich Nhat Hanh. But now we are embracing the reality that there is no more single lineage holder for the beloved community. It is being given to all of life to tend and to repair. Jesus sent them out to proclaim the beloved community. So interestingly, the world knows this too. The world outside the church knows this too. These marvelous Sustainable Development Goals, which are the successor to the Millennium Development Goals, are based on the idea that every one of these things that I've been talking about and more are interconnected. They depend on each other. One of the most powerful ways to think about it is that if you empower a woman in a village in Kenya, let's say, you empower the whole village. And so gender equality, working on that, or universal primary education, another one of the goals, any one of these places of entry starts to work good in all of the 17 goals. So here's the fundamental piece of truth to this. Anywhere you throw your anchor, anywhere you put your shovel in the soil, anywhere you tend that piece of your heart to which you are drawn, that starts to work a change in the whole. So Catherine Hayhoe talked about the issue that is yours this morning, and that really gives value to the beloved community, to the whole idea of climate change. I would say that is true. This is true. So whatever your passion is, tending it is going to tend all of them. But it will work better, let me say, if there is a consciousness that acknowledges that my issue is not the only issue. That what I care about, I talk a lot about climate change, that it is not the only way to repair the beloved community. The good news is that if my perception is that we are partnering with each other in this, it will even increase this efficacy of our efforts together. This wonderful, we heard about the Drawdown Project this morning from Catherine Hayhoe. And one of the things that the Drawdown Project, the author of that, Paul Hawken, talks about is all the NGOs. So every nonprofit all over the world, there are more than 100,000 of them that have been counted. So some of them are working on preventing violence against women. Some of them are working with foster children. All the things that you know about and care about, all these things we're talking about, they function, as Paul Hawken says, as a kind of immune system of the earth. And he says that they do this largely without being aware, conscious of each other. He's right. He's right. But what he doesn't say is, what if we were conscious of each other? What if my mind, my consciousness, had in mind that what my work on climate change is doing would be enhanced if I could make partnership with Black Lives Matter over this issue, or if I could make consciousness with any of the other areas of concern that are represented by these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So you'll find in your packet some resources that I've put together on creation care, and yet there are all these other areas. I threw in there some guides to getting into the Sustainable Development Goals. There's what's called a knowledge hub, where you can find out about all 17 of these. And I have a call for you. I said it was about giving you hope, but I do think that the way we give each other hope and to the world is to move forward in a way that is conscious of each other's commitments and concerns. So I wonder if, isn't this the most fabulous? I've got to order one of these. So Bishop Curry's birthday almost always happens when the House of Bishops is having its spring meeting. And we were in Texas, and a group of bishops went out to get him a birthday present. They went to one of these great big multi-place gas stations that has a store inside, and they came back with a version of this t-shirt for the presiding bishop. And I looked at it and I just started laughing. I thought it was hysterical. Want a taco about Jesus, let us pray. And then I looked at that verse, Mark 16:15, and I've got to say, I didn't recognize what it was. So I looked it up, and this is what it was. This is with my translation. And Jesus said to them, it's at the very end of the Gospel of Mark, go into the whole cosmos, proclaiming the good news to all creation. So what if we did this in conscious circles, deacons, and everybody else who happens to be happily gathered on this conference? What if we made circles, beloved community circles, of people who were committed to different things together and sharing those commitments with each other and asking how we could support each other in repairing the beloved community. Want to taco about Jesus? Let us pray. Let us proclaim good news by being in beloved community circles together. Each deacon could form one, inviting people to bring their commitments, lured by wonder and beauty, into the beloved community and work to repair this community which God has given us. Thank you so much.